We have Stephen Mattarollo. Dr. Steve Mattarollo has a background in immunology with over 10 years experience as a biomedical researcher, leading a group in the field of cancer immunotherapy and neuroimmunology at the University of Queensland. More recently, due to a chronic illness, his main interests have turned to teaching mind-body practices, including qigong, breathwork, relaxation therapy, and meditation. Steve's passion for qigong stemmed from his background in the martial arts, as well as the benefits that gentle, moving meditation and energy medicine has had on his own self-healing journey. Using his Western-based science medicine background and Eastern holistic healing expertise, Steve's services provide integrative health education coaching, guided mind-body practices, and energy medicine for promoting health and for management of chronic physical and mental health conditions. Welcome, Steve, to the Wellbeing Edge. It's so good to see you.
Morning, Ruth. Pleasure to be here.
So it's funny because we were talking about this a little while ago, and we have a shared background going way back that I think it's really interesting that I've discovered you again after all of these years, but I actually knew you from, I think I saw you playing soccer as probably an 8-year-old boy with my brother in the local soccer team. So you grew up with my brother and in the same age group, and yeah, we have this kind of long history, but I haven't seen you for decades, really.
Seems like yesterday.
It does. Yeah. Yeah, and you've gone on this amazing journey. And so when I sort of discovered the journey that you've been on, I thought, wow, it'd be great to be able to chat with you about it. So would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and also what led to your work in biomedical research?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, pretty standard upbringing. Went to university, studied biomedical science. Was in the fork of the road whether to go to medical school or go into research, and I decided I was best suited for biomedical research. I went on and did my PhD. Was all through the University of Queensland, and I ended up doing my PhD thesis on cancer immunotherapy. So really looking at, this was back in the early days before immunotherapy became a thing for cancer. But I was very interested in how the immune system functioned within the body, and particularly how it sort of recognized and fought off cancer. So really it was studying different types of ways of getting the immune system to recognize tumors as being something bad, something to attack. And that's kind of over time with, worldwide efforts has actually led to discovery of a lot of different immunotherapies, which are now used routinely to treat cancer. So yeah, I ran a lab through UQ, spent a bit of time in Melbourne, Peter MacCallum Cancer Centre down there. And yeah, really got to a point of developing or starting my own lab where we focused on developing vaccines for blood cancers, therapeutic vaccines. And I was largely doing work in mouse models of cancer. And then unfortunately, yeah, back in 2017, I developed a chronic illness, which kind of put a halt on my research career, unfortunately. But we can talk more about that stage of my life. But yeah, pretty standard. Married, 2 kids, 2 young kids. Living in suburbia. Pretty standard diet.
And with the work that you were doing, what was it that really drew you to that particular interest? Like, it's quite quite specific. Was there was it just tell me about what brought you to that, and in particular, looking at neuroimmunology, and you were saying that it was quite a new field sort of when you were at that beginning threshold of it. So yeah, just tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so in terms of the immunology, it just fascinated me in undergrad. We went through, as biomedical science, we go through all the um, different fields, including microbiology, immunology, and I was really fascinated of the complexity of the immune system, and what it was capable of doing.
Mm.
And even back then, it was probably 25 years ago, we knew a lot less than we know now about how the immune system functions and how it regulates other um, systems in the body.
Mm.
And cancer, yeah, that was just a personal interest of mine. I was always wanting to be involved in cancer research and improve outcomes for patients. The neuroimmunology side of things, which is actually sort of more what they call psychoneuroimmunology, so PNI. So that's actually the more recent, very recent explosion of research in this particular field, and it's primarily focused on uh, looking at how our thoughts and behaviors, psychology, as a psych part of it,
Mm.
psychology impacts our health, impacts the physiology within the body, how the body functions,
Mm.
particularly how it impacts the nervous system. So that's the neuro,
Mm.
and immunology is the immune system. So there's sort of connection and communication, um, basically between our brain, our thoughts, and the associated activity that then leads to impacts on how our nervous system functions and our immune system functions. So a big component of that research, including our research, because we started going down this path just before I got ill, unfortunately. It was quite exciting, but it particularly focused on the effects of chronic stress and inflammation
Yeah.
um, on nervous system function and immune function,
Yeah.
and then how that then impacts our health, and particularly how it then leads to chronic illness or chronic inflammatory disorders. So I found that very interesting because it really led down that pathway of that mind-body connection,
Yeah.
um, which I've always been very interested in through my martial arts and through sport and through other things. So that was really my passion at the time. But
And does that, sorry,
yeah.
does that, is that sort of connected? Could we say in a very kind of layman's type of terms, or semi layman's terms of, that we'd be looking at the thoughts preceding the HPA axis type of process and the release of adrenaline, which then has this knock-on effect of inflammation within the body? Is that sort of the direction that they're really looking at there, or are there other factors that I'm not aware of? Or
Yeah, there are a lot of pathways. That's the classical standard that most people would have
yeah,
heard of.
yeah.
Um, so a stressor, a trigger, can either be sort of physiological, or a perceived stress. So it doesn't always have to be something physical, but even just thinking about something negative or very that elicits a strong emotional response will trigger these pathways. So really, it's that limbic system, that amygdala limbic system within the
Mhm.
brain. Um, which is evolved over time to protect us,
Mm.
to keep us alive, basically, to respond to stress. And that triggers then these neural pathways in the brain, and then um, so chemical release and also hormone release, which then goes into the body. So
Mm.
just the HPA axis of the hypothalamus to the pituitary, and then like chemicals to the adrenal glands on the kidneys, which can release cortisol
Mm.
and like adrenaline, noradrenaline.
Mm.
So that basically gets the system ramped up to respond to the stress and mobilizes the immune system, increases our heart rate, dilutes our pupils, gets the muscles ready, basically. The problem becomes, um, so that actually activates the immune system acutely. So that's kind of a good thing. The
Mm.
problem becomes
The chronic.
if the
Yeah.
chronicity. So
Mm.
basically, if that's not switched off when it's no longer needed, so after the threats, mitigated, um, and instead it's replaced with sort of this low level chronic stimulation of these pathways, which can be caused by a whole array of things, including exposure to our current lifestyle, the way we live our lifestyle, a lot of different things, is where these systems become dysregulated and don't get switched off or don't respond appropriately.
Mm.
So what happens is that obviously the immune system responds to the hormones and they then release their own chemicals called cytokines.
Mm.
So these are messengers. And that drives the inflammation. And inflammation is important also, if you get injured or wounded or have an infection, it'll help clear that. But again, if that's not switched off or sort of gets dysregulated, you end up with this low level, sometimes even barely noticeable stress and inflammation, which then that's what leads to, over time leads to problems because the body's not meant to have all these inflammatory mediators floating around and circulating. It can travel, even if it's released in the body, these chemicals can go into the brain and it will cause neuroinflammation as well. So we have issues then with mental health and
Memory.
other neurological problems as well. So it can become an issue.
Mm. And when we're looking at all of this, I always find it fascinating because you were just talking about this sort of chronic low level of stress that so many people are going through or living with right now, and it's almost become automatic, that this is how I wake up and this is the way I'm living my life. So then when you've got that flip side of the parasympathetic nervous system, when you're able to flip out of that stress response and move yourself into a state of calm, it feels so unnatural for so many people, or it feels so different. And, I don't know about you, but the majority of people I speak with, when they do, through maybe some practices that we're doing in a session, they'll move into that calmer state and then they feel like going to sleep. It's almost like their body just realizes how much rest it needs. What would have been your experiences in that, helping people on that side of things and getting them into that state of parasympathetic nervous system response being switched on? And
it's interesting. So it's almost become normalized, both within society, but also within your own body, this sort of level of stress. We become so used to it, it doesn't feel unnatural. It almost becomes, like you said, sort of the norm. Um, and because of that, it can be difficult sometimes to recognize it and also to then switch it, not necessarily switch it off per se, but then to regulate it and get out of this sort of hypervigilance, hyperactivity that's happening, because this chronic stress is also causing changes, subtle changes within the brain, the architecture, but also how it functions. So all of a sudden you become less resilient to stress. The triggers become, so this hypervigilance, causes the triggers to become very minor. You get triggered by things very easily, you react to things more easily. And then that becomes very difficult for people to then to regulate. And yes, these practices, particularly these mind-body practices, which I'm sure we'll talk about more going forward. But it's really firstly that awareness of what's going on, awareness that what's actually happening with you in your body and how you're reacting to that, so how you're reacting to the stress. And then, as you said, it's really about dialing everything down, so slowing things down, creating that stillness and space and reflection to be able to notice, and awareness, to be able to notice what's happening. Until you're aware of it, you can't really change it. And then it's applying these, initially guided practices and then tools and techniques, which you then have to, you have lifelong to help retrain the brain initially and then help embody that. So you're also relaxing and calming down, switching on, like I said, this parasympathetic nervous system tones response to relax and therefore reduce the inflammation, reduce all these things that we don't want necessarily happening within the body.
And like when you were doing this work, the neuroimmunology and the psychoneuroimmunology, What sort of like how was your lifestyle then? Did you have any sense of the actual practice of doing these things at that time? Like what was going on for you?
It's very much theoretical, and even now, a lot of the focus is still on the science. They're still on creating the evidence and understanding of what's going on, which I agree is very important. And there's a lot we still have to learn. Um, it wasn't so much the practical side of things, but I always had the back of my mind, particularly when I was talking to people about it and how they were very interested in stress and what they could do about it. What are good ways in different scenarios to help people, whether it's in a healthy state and just exhausted and burnt out, or whether you're in, an illness state, chronic illness state, how we can help those people. And it really wasn't until so, I mean, my stress, I had high level stress with my work and lifestyle. Again, it became normal for me as well. I managed it pretty well through good diet, exercise. I was pretty healthy, so I was able to manage it pretty well. Um, but it wasn't really until I became ill that things kind of changed, and my relationship with stress changed, and how I managed it. It became more a change from management of stress to creating stress resilience, which we
Mm.
can talk about a bit more,
Mm.
but became very critical for me because as we'll get to, um, the particular change that were happening within my brain and my vestibular system meant that any sort of even low levels of stress were very aggravating for the system, and triggered a lot of symptoms.
So tell us what happened. So
Yeah.
what happened and when, and how was it at the initial stages?
Yeah, so back in, I think it was late 2017, I still remember I was riding my bike to work, so I used to cycle to work most days. And the first thing I noticed was just sort of being a bit off balance on my push bike,
Mm.
turning my head to check the traffic, turning back and not being on the road where I expected to be, and I thought that was a bit strange, but didn't really have many other symptoms. And then all of a sudden I developed these weird vision sensations and dizziness, the room spinning, vertigo, so typical sort of vertigo um, sensations, and just being really lightheaded and just feeling really off basically. And it kind of quite coincided with I had a quite nasty chest infection at the time, so I wasn't feeling well already. But
Mm.
then this dizziness wouldn't go away. In fact, it was getting worse. And I remember I had a conference. We were living in Brisbane. I had a conference in Melbourne at the time, and I managed to get down there, but I had to turn around and come back pretty quickly because the symptoms were just too bad. My balance was off. Could hardly stand or walk straight. So it was a very scary time, overwhelming. I wasn't sure what was happening. So we did, obviously the first thing they do is they scan your brain. Nothing was wrong visually in the scans.
Mm.
And fortunately, I knew uh, a few of the local ear, nose, and throat specialists and neurologists in Brisbane through my work. So I went to see them, and they sent me down to the RPA hospital in Sydney. They got proper testing because they suspected there's something was wrong with my vestibular system, which is your balance organs within the brain, important for balance and vision and sense of where you are, etc.
Mm.
So I did all this audio vestibular testing, and very quickly realized I had bilateral, so both sides of the inner ear dysfunction. So the vestibular system, both sides weren't working, which is the peripheral part of the vestibular system, and potentially also some central involvement. So that's connects to the brainstem.
Mm-hmm.
Signals connect to the brainstem. So there could be something going on there because I was getting sort of migraine headaches and stuff. So they diagnosed that reasonably quickly within a couple of months, but uh, prognosis is really that there's not much we can really do about this. You've lost function in your inner ear. There's really no way of it returning. This particular, and because it was bilateral, it was quite severe. Lost function in both sides. There wasn't any compensation of one ear being able to compensate.
Right.
So yeah, very difficult time dealing with the symptoms, but also not knowing what the future kind of held for me. So
How
I
does
persist.
it
Yeah, sorry.
how does it actually, what actually happens for that hyperfunction? So what really goes on and like, from the sounds of it, one day it's fine and the next day it's not so fine, or it deteriorated over a fairly short time. So what was going on with the vestibular system?
No one really knows for sure, including
Mm.
myself. So the symptoms came on pretty suddenly, but whether the gradual sort of the loss of function was more gradual than over time, I just didn't notice it symptomatically. I don't know what caused it. We don't know. Sometimes it's caused by certain antibiotics, which are toxic to the inner ear. It's called ototoxicity, like gentamicin can be toxic. Um, Head trauma, concussion can trigger, but I never had any of these things. So for me, it was unknown etiology was the official
Uh,
terms.
yeah.
No one really know what caused it. But yeah, the symptoms came on pretty suddenly and basically never went away. Um, and yeah, in terms of what's happening with the inner ear, again, it could be a number of areas which can be damaged.
Yeah.
And again, without being able to visualize it on scans, it's hard to know where with the testing they do, they can kind of narrow it down to whether it's, certain areas of the inner ear structure, um, which is not functioning well. But in my case, it was just this gradual loss over time. And I think what happened was there wasn't complete loss in both ears initially. So the disparity between the left and the right ear function meant that they were getting sort of weird, unusual signals, and that actually increased the vertigo because things that the signals are not firing right.
Yeah.
Um, it drives all these nasty symptoms. So the symptoms actually improved when I lost more of the function, surprisingly. Um, but yeah, for the first few years, the symptoms were pretty bad. It changed my whole lifestyle. It changed the way I functioned. What I was going to say before was I persisted with work with a little longer. Because I
Mm.
had PhD students, I had to sort of try and get through, finish up, but I could no longer do that work. So I was housebound initially for months, years.
Wow.
The severity of the symptoms, it was always there. They got sort of better and worse, but I never knew when they were going to drop or how long when had that dip.
Mm.
And that sort of the relapse and the symptoms, they could last for a week, they could last for months, and then all of a sudden they get a little bit better again. So it's very frustrating, and yeah, overwhelming time for me and the family. Yeah.
Mm. And what did you do in the first, that initial period afterwards when you were trying to, you were talking about getting the PhD students through, and then just in terms of your own management of it, what were the initial things that you were trying to do to help yourself to get through that?
Yeah, so initially it was very much I was very much in survival mode, or the body thinks it's in survival mode. So just really coping day in, day out, just get through the day.
Mm.
Trying to deal with the changing symptoms because again, it's that balance, it's that bouncy vision. So when you walk, everything bounces, so you can't really stay stable and upright.
Right.
Um, and obviously the vertigo spins and vertigo attacks and the chronic headaches. And so yeah, I was really just trying to manage the symptoms and also trying to also be somewhat still useful in the household. But back then my kids were quite young, maybe uh 3 and 6 year olds, I think. So, starting school and yeah, so yeah, quite
Yeah.
quite busy around the house. So just trying to be a bit useful still. But um yeah, it was really just about getting through the day initially. But then it got to a point where I realized I had to make some changes, even just really minor changes,
Mm.
you know, action, small gradual changes. That's really when I started exploring these different practices. I started off what really initially helped me improve as the symptoms improved, and also for my mental health was being out in nature.
Yeah.
So I'm very fortunate. Our house backs onto a forest here in Brisbane, and just walking through the forest, even though it could be uncomfortable sometimes. Just, being in that quiet, peaceful environment, being immersed in the nature was very beneficial for just, again, toning down all that hypervigilance and all that symptomatic stuff that was going on, anxiety. And then, really delving into, relaxation practices. Again, going back to that effects of stress, I realized I had to really try and dial down and focus on, recuperating, resting so the body could recover. So looking at, meditation and relaxation practices and very much sort of Eastern philosophy and the ancient healing arts from Eastern tradition. And that kind of really led me into this sort of Tai Chi, Qigong practice, this sort of moving meditation. Because when I started doing that together in combination with the nature immersion, I noticed it's quite a dramatic shift. I mean, it didn't cure me, it didn't really change the rest of my life, but it's a subtle enough change that allowed me to feel better within myself and do a few more things. I noticed, the symptoms were improving. So I delved into that a bit more to a point where I study that formally, both the nature therapy and also the Qigong. And then when I really got into the specifics of it, which isn't what I realized initially is just the movements, but really that internal awareness, that the proper breathing, the relaxation, the, the work on the body, the alignment and posture of the body, and all those things that are sort of packaged together within these practices, mind-body practices, became very powerful and help regulating the systems. Because really the only hope for me for the improvement is to allow the brain to compensate over the defect in the vestibular system. So it's called neuroplasticity.
Yeah.
So over time, what the hope is, even though the vestibular system is not working anymore, the brain can overcome some of these defects and bypass some of these systems. And I believe that's sort of what's happened over time. This practice has created this enough of a change in the internal environment within the body, this sort of internal healing environment to allow that neuroplasticity to really work. Because if we're stuck in this stress, again, going back to the stress, if we're stuck in this hypervigilance stress state, you can do physiotherapy, you can do a lot of these things, but it's not going to work very effectively when your everything's ramped up so much. We have, again, dial down everything. And I found that through these practices to then allow this innate wisdom, this innate intelligence within the body to start self-regulating itself. Like it knows what to do. The body wants to be healthy. It knows how to be healthy. We often just get in the way. Not always on purpose, but some of things need to get out of the way to allow these things to start regulating, and then obviously get the help, external help, to improve things.
Yeah, that's so interesting because you just sparked in me. I think it was way back in Psychology 101 when they were talking about, I think it was a stroke victim who had damage to the language processing area of their brains, and how the brain compensated by, basically getting some new real estate in the brain to create the language, the language formation, and how people can sort of move through that by the brain being able to adapt. But it's, as you said, to be able to have that take place, whether it's in the brain or the body, it really is around giving it the time and the space. And we talk a lot about healing, and then we're, bringing in the actual science behind it to say, like, you've got the inflammatory cytokines, and we're able to reduce that a little bit and allow that body to move through that healing process, instead of having that sort of inflammation, on guard, almost like the body's almost on guard all the time, sort of fighting, and just not getting that time to recalibrate and move through the process of healing. So interesting though, that that concept that your brain might be able to, not create a new vestibular system, obviously, but create a compensation of some kind. That's really interesting.
Yeah, and the more I do these practices, I think, it's a gradual. That's why I said earlier, sort of, you have to really, these things don't happen overnight. And
Mm,
a lot of us expect just to be able to take a pill or, do this, do that and be fixed, or, not expect to do any work. But the reality is, you have to spend time doing these practices, understanding how it's affecting the body, experiencing what it actually does. A lot of people, going back to my science background, a lot of people want to see the evidence first, and want to see how this, why this works, how this works. And there is good evidence now for these holistic therapies,
mm,
including Tai Chi, Qigong, for a lot of different chronic health conditions. But really, that belief that it's actually helping, doing something, comes through the experience. Like, you can read as much as you want, you can be told as much as is out there, but until you actually experience it yourself,
mm,
you don't get the power, the powerfulness of it, if that's the word.
mm.
So I've noticed that myself, but I noticed that now through my clients as well. When they actually experience what it's like just to slow down, dial everything down, take a moment, and coordinate the breath, breathing with movement and all this sort of stuff, which just really helps reset the body, reset the nervous system and the brain, and the emotional, emotions play a huge part. Just regulating these emotions, expressing emotions through these practices. They realize, oh, geez, why haven't I done this? Why haven't I been
Yeah.
taught this, throughout my life? So, yeah, it's very exciting times going forward as people really understand more
Mm,
about this mind-body connection. It's not, we still separated mind-body, but, in my opinion, and a lot more people's opinions now, it's all one thing. There's no separation.
mm,
What happens in the brain, if through our thoughts, directly impacts our physiology within the body, the biochemistry, and the same other way around. So, if there's inflammation or certain things happening in the body, it's going to affect your mood. It's going to affect, your thoughts and all that sort of stuff as well. So they're all very much interrelated.
mm.
So if you can calm down the mind, you're going to calm down the what's happening within the body, and vice versa. If you can release tension and emotions released through the body, you're going to improve what's happening within your mental health. So that's why a lot of us now focus on this sort of holistic approach, personalized as well, to the
Mm.
particular illness or particular person, but really focusing on not just the physical, not just the mental, which seems to be the two go-tos, um, but really exploring the emotional sides of health, and spiritual too. Spiritual
Mm.
plays, and also for me, has played a huge role. Um, connection with self, connection with others in the environment and nature, that meaning and purpose behind things, acceptance, etc. Um, putting all these things together into a practice is really important, really, really powerful. Um,
Do you feel like you would have, sorry, would you feel like you would have, I cut you off there, by the way, we'll
no,
have to
no,
come back to what you were going to say. But do you feel like you would have arrived at this place anyway, at some point in your life, this understanding of the mind body? I know you were already approaching it through your research anyway. Do you think you would have embodied it, or was this whole thing sort of on fast forward for you, and you've kind of learned it very quickly? Would you have arrived there, do you think?
I think I would have arrived there eventually. I like to explore things. I like to experiment. I mean, I've been like this since I was a kid, not just
Mm.
through my research. So I think we got there originally. But yes, as a kid, um, even since I was a kid, I was always been very interested in how the body works and fitness and all that sort of stuff. And then as I grew older, more about the psychological aspects of, I studied psychology at uni as well. So the psychological side of things and our behavior, how our behavior affects our health and etc. So I think I was preconditioned to
Mm.
go down this pathway, and through my martial art, I did martial arts for over 10 years as well. So that really introduced me to those Eastern traditions.
Mm.
This 5,000 Qigong, it's a 5,000-year-old practice, with roots in Chinese medicine and Taoism. So these are not things I just made up in the last 100 years. These have been around for a long, long time. And they're all about this interconnectedness within the body. It wasn't really until much, much later in the Western world we kind of separated everything,
Yeah.
which made it easier to study and
Yeah.
to understand things isolated. But then it's got to the point now where we've kind of kept everything isolated and try and fix everything isolated when really everything's working together.
Mm.
And so you have to kind of understand it and then try and address how these things are interrelated. One example, they're believing now, depression or certain types of depression is really a physiological disease. So it actually stems from inflammation within the body, which is
Mhm.
then become neuroinflammation, and then that's lead to changes in um, the brain, and therefore symptoms of depression. So depression can almost be seen as a more of a symptom of a physical disease, if that makes sense. It could be initiated somewhere else. So that's one example, but
Mm.
we shouldn't separate things as, depression being as mental illness and, inflammatory bowel disease or, IBS is something just within the gut and, isolated there. So,
Absolutely. Yeah.
a lot of our mental thoughts, etc., can really impact on, and the stress can really impact on our gut and,
Right.
those sort of IBS symptoms and, dysbiosis and problems within the gut microbes and therefore leaky gut syndrome, all those sort of things which can
Exactly. Moving
happen,
into skin
inflammation.
conditions.
Yeah,
Yeah.
then, affects the rest of your body, but can also create this inflammation within the brain. So
Yeah.
it's all interrelated. And until we all sort of get to that realization, we'll start making some big progress, and particularly the chronic conditions,
Mm.
which Western medicines still struggles a lot with, sort of dealing with. A lot of people out there suffering with ongoing chronic conditions, poorly managed chronic conditions. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So much to think about there. So, and where are you at now? What's going on in your life now? Where are you? What are you doing with your work and
Yeah. So it's really only been within this last probably year, maybe not even quite a year, where my health has been stable enough, um, and well enough to be able to get to my next step, in my sort of purpose and meaning and passion, which is to help people now through these mind body practices, particularly so this restorative, integrative qigong, um, services to help manage chronic conditions. So even though I've been practicing this myself for a number of years and been trained for a number of years, I only recently sort of, got to the point where I did my website last year, and I'm sort of slowly growing the practice. So I'm really enjoying that,
Mm.
because obviously I get the benefits from doing the practice with the people I'm also helping. So it's great.
Mm.
Goes both ways, and I see a lot of progress in people with all sorts of sort of chronic conditions, neurological, cardiovascular problems, cancer, all sorts of different, chronic fatigue. So from fibromyalgia is very beneficial for those sort of disorders as well. So I'm really enjoying that. Getting back into the football, the soccer. So I've
Oh
been
yeah.
playing that for a number of years now, and I tried to maintain my presence. I couldn't always play because of the symptoms were too bad. So getting back into that more regularly. Actually, what I want to do
Oh, there we go.
is a bit of a plug for
What's the team?
play for Annerley Football Club, but this is the
Very
only
cool.
axis of
Axis
evil.
of evil.
So
Nice.
give these guys a bit of a plug because they're a great bunch of blokes.
Yeah.
Been with them for sort of 12 years or more now, and really, going back to what helps with improving chronic illness, the social aspect, which I haven't really talked about, but that social connection, having
Yeah.
that support is really critical.
Yes.
Um, and these guys, have been, fantastic over the years, understanding, that being there for me, allowing me to have a space and a place to go to, something a bit regular that I can actually, try and do, even if I couldn't play, just to be there for small periods of time and just be amongst the boys, that on top of obviously my family at home was
Mm.
very important. So yeah, big shout out to these guys.
So good. Yeah. I mean, there's so much good research now around, of course, loneliness and the impact of, loneliness on health and well-being and longevity. And, so having that social connection is such a protective factor for your health and well-being. So yeah, that's fantastic that you've had these very understanding group of people that have been supporting you the whole time and
Yeah,
alongside you.
it can be very isolating.
Mm,
Again, particularly in those situations, because I couldn't socialize anymore. I couldn't go out. Couldn't even go to the shops. Couldn't really get out anywhere. So it very quickly becomes isolating. And like I said, that sort of loneliness sort of creeps in. And a lot of people sort of not understanding what's happening and what you're going through. So yeah, to
mm,
have that support network is very important. Even on top of trying to incorporate better lifestyle, better diet, exercises, mind body practices, sleep. We haven't talked about
mm.
sleep, but that's
Massive.
very important.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, having this that social support is important. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And so on reflection for this whole journey that you've been on, how has this entire experience, do you think, shaped you not just as a scientist, but as a person? What do you think you've taken away from the whole experience?
I think I've changed a lot, whether it's for the better or for the worse, probably both
Mm.
over time. But once you lose that illness identity. So we haven't really spoken about that today, but
Yes,
that can be
absolutely.
play a very big part in chronic illness. You almost become this illness, and that's your whole life.
Defines you.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, it's understandable, but we have to try and get to the point where we sort of get past that. So I kind of think I've gotten to that point because if you're not focusing as much on the illness, you're not resisting the illness, then that also helps with that creating an environment to allow things to improve. So that resistance, that's what I was going to say earlier when you
Yes.
said,
Oh, good.
we'll get back to
We're able to capture that.
it.
That's
Yeah,
good.
yeah. Acceptance has really been a big part of my
Right.
recovery. So going from that resistance of, why me, why is this happening, fighting against it, to just accepting of what is, which you have to really be in the present moment to allow that to happen. And then, you know, how to then go forward, best way moving forward through that
Mm.
acceptance. Um, but yeah, how it's changed me. I think I'm a lot more aware now of just being, just creating that time, reflection and stillness, not getting caught up in stress or getting caught up with problems that don't need to be problems.
Circle of
Really
compassion.
really focusing on the good things and gratitude. Gratitude practice has been important for me too. So I keep a gratitude journal. So really just focusing on more the positive things and not worrying about, we stress over so much minor stuff and
Mm.
yeah, it's not unimportant things, really.
Mm.
So just a great perspective of life, great perspective of things, and just trying to enjoy things more, but at the same time, sort of trying to maintain some level of sort of meaning and purpose, which I think is important through life too. It doesn't have to be something grand, it can be very small things, but to have that cultivating that meaning, I think's
Yeah.
I think it's been an important process for me as well. But yeah, you might have to ask someone else how I've changed. Hope hopefully a lot of things for the better, but there are still a lot of things I can't do, or saying no to things. It's become very normal for me, but that's okay. Having boundaries, and
Yep.
even for healthy people, that's important. But particularly with an illness,
Mm.
having those boundaries for to be able to focus on your own health. Um, And for me, it's been about being a little bit more strict about certain things like diets and exercise and stuff, which can turn into a bit of a habit. But I guess it's, at least it's a healthy habit. You can go overboard with things, obviously, but yeah, just really focusing on things that's going to help me along the way, put me in the best position to be able to feel okay and to the body to continue healing.
Yeah, and just a quick question on that. You kind of sparked something in me when you were talking about acceptance,
Yeah.
because acceptance in in meditation they talk a lot about acceptance, and it doing a practice like meditation helps you to become more accepting of what is, and not trying to challenge or push against a reality that you can't control and that kind of thing. And do you find in
Hmm.
Qigong that comes up as well? Do you find,
It's yeah,
yeah,
it's central. So really,
yeah,
it's again, it always comes down initially to that awareness, that
mm,
self-awareness, because you'd be surprised when a lot of us are not really aware of what's going on within ourselves. We're into our routines, blah 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 blah. We're especially in this fast-paced world, and we don't give that time to really reflect and have that awareness. Um, so it's about that awareness. It's about that embodiment. Because we hold a lot of stuff within the body as well, and it's just coming to the realization a lot of the time. Like I said, it's getting out of our own way and coming to the realization of all these things which come natural, should come natural and have usually come natural
mm,
within us. So our natural state is to be healthy and relaxed and calm and peaceful and body working in harmony and in balance. That's all the natural state. We're just for whatever reasons gotten out of this natural state. So these practices are very powerful at um, doing that. And the beauty of the movement. So sitting meditation was difficult for me
yeah, yeah,
because of the symptoms. It was hard for me to sit with those all the symptoms happening and try and do the meditation. So what really resonated with me was adding in that movement and the concentration, the gentle, relaxed concentration within the movement and using the breath to coordinate that just sends you to another place. It's very calming, very relaxing place. And yeah, we work on through that. We also work on the emotions because they can bubble up as you're doing this. As you allow yourself to rest and recuperate and slow down, a lot of things tend to bubble up. And that's why a lot of us can't slow down or don't want to slow down.
want
We
to
tend to
face
just
the thing,
distract. Yeah, we
yeah,
tend to distract ourselves instead. Even when we are relaxing, we tend to be on our phones or doing,
mm,
um, really you have to sit with those feelings and emotions or do it through these practices to allow them to be released. Otherwise, it's going to fester more and more and build up more and more, which creates inflammation. And that goes back to all that
mm,
sort of stuff. So when I talk about relaxation, just
mm,
final point really, I call it holistic relaxation because people think of when I say relaxation, he's just plopping down on the couch and watching
yes,
Netflix or something. Um, Really, that's not how we work. So if you think about the mind, body, and soul, spirit, the mind to relax needs calmness, stillness, peace. Okay, so it's really dialing down. And that's not going to happen if we're stimulating it through, you know, screens and
yes,
stuff. So it needs that stillness. The body, people think we need to flop down and not do anything, but the body actually requires movement. We're built to move. Movement is medicine, as they say. It doesn't have to be, it's not, I'm not talking about high intensity. I'm talking about gentle, restorative movement. So the
mm,
body likes to be moving a lot of the time. So you can actually relax by doing gentle movement, whether it's yoga, tai chi, stretching, whatever. There are going to be times where you need to sit down and rest, yes, but you'd
mm,
be surprised how much movement is good for the body. And then the soul, the spirit requires for the true restorative relaxation requires connection,
mhm,
nourishment and connection. This goes back to sort of the spiritual side of things, the social connection, um, the self connection as well. So when I'm saying connection, I don't mean going to a nightclub and
yeah,
meeting up with your friends and that sort of connection. That's good too, but I'm talking about that restorative stuff. It's about that internal awareness, internal connection, and that sort of stuff. So
Mm.
I think I got to my point there, but
Mm.
yeah, I think key points.
Having those three areas as being sort of fundamental to I guess having that regulation, the self-regulation.
The
Yeah.
body can't repair or heal itself unless you give it a chance to be in that restorative state, that
Yeah.
repair, rest, recuperating state, physically, mentally, spiritually. You have to work on those different areas because you have to create that state in those different areas. And then, like I said earlier, a lot of the times the body intrinsically knows what to do. It's not going to happen overnight, but gradually the body will get back to its more natural state, and you can help that by obviously things within your lifestyle and getting out external support and these
Definitely.
practices. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, amazing. So I know you're running your business now. Do you want to share how people can reach you? Anything you want to leave the audience with? Specifically, any programs or classes that you're running that you'd like to let people know about?
Yeah, sure. So you can reach me either through my Facebook page. It's Restorative Qigong with Dr. Steve. Is the name of the page. We can just look up my name and go via there. My website is drstevejikung.com. So on there, I speak a lot more about my background and the philosophy behind things, and really the combination between the Western science, medicine, blending that in with the Eastern philosophy. So I guess where I'm coming from is combining that background knowledge and that sort of science-based background, the Western background, but now with that influence of the Eastern healing practices, and also with the personal experience through having a chronic illness myself. So I've tried to incorporate that within all my programs. So you can read more about that on the website, and what services I offer. So really, I help people either in sort of a health promotion, preventative side of things. So these are people who are otherwise well, but might be struggling with fatigue or being overwhelmed or have burnout, whatever, or just want to maintain and improve their health. So Qigong is very good for health prevention, illness prevention. And then also then people recuperating through illness or injury, but particularly chronic conditions. And as I said earlier, it's really, there's no main focus because this helps with a lot of different systems within the body, and therefore a lot of chronic illnesses, even common things like diabetes and heart problems and stuff. I do have a special interest at the moment, particularly with cancer support and mental health, and also vestibular dizziness issues like I have. So those three have have extra interest, I guess. So I'm really promoting those areas. So people go through particularly through the cancer journey, through diagnosis and treatment, and also afterwards, how to sort of manage and deal with that through these mind body practices. So I tend to be one-on-one at the moment, personalized one-on-one sessions, but going forward, I would also like to form these modality specific groups. So we might have a cancer support class.
Oh yeah.
So we can take a practice that's focusing on helping manage those things. A lot of things like pain, fatigue, mental clarity, physical stuff with cancer. So it's basically tailored towards different diseases, different areas of the body. So people through the website, people can express their interest, or join a individual program, or express interest for group classes, which we can form down the track. But yeah, they're the two ways to contact me: through the website, through my Facebook page, get in contact with me directly, and we can go from there.
Awesome. Great. And do you do any community-based stuff at the moment as well, or anything where people could come along? Or
Yeah, occasionally I hold sort of occasional sessions down in the park to join in. It's difficult to find time, which is useful for going to suit
everybody?
everyone.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm also at the moment trying to integrate this into healthcare settings. So within, for example, hospital, clinics or private clinics. For example, cancer at the moment, really looking into cancer support services within those settings, with the goal of holding regular, Tai Chi, Qigong based mind body practices through those centres or through private organisations or through charities, for example. So yeah, watch this space because that's a gradually growing area. Where I might be able to provide programs and supports and stuff online as well. So I didn't mention, so a lot of this stuff is done in person if you're in Brisbane, or I also do these programs online as well. So don't have to be in Brisbane.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Stephen Mattarollo. It's fantastic to have you on the podcast today. Really, really appreciate the time that you've taken to walk us through the journey that you've been on and where you're at now. So, yeah, I just want to say thank you.
My pleasure. Anytime. Thank you. Thanks
Thank
for the
you.
time.
If today's episode sparked something for you, choose one small action and try it this week. Wellbeing doesn't need to be big to be effective. Don't forget to leave a rating and review, share this episode with a friend, or reach out to me on LinkedIn and let me know what you think. Thanks for spending this time with me, and have an amazing day.